What's up, my fellow scruffy looking nerf herders, and welcome to the Carbonite Chat. Today we're going to be reviewing the fan film Dark Resurrection Volume 0, which is an odd name for it, but this was requested for me to review after my last video of fan film reviews every Monday at 9. And so I did this one, and the other ones I was positive on. The last one I reviewed a couple that I said weren't good, but mainly focused on talking about one that was good. But this is a very popular fan film. It's got over 3 million views on YouTube, and a lot of the comments were really positive. The like ratio was high compared to the dislikes, but I have to say I absolutely hated this. This was just not good at all. I watched it twice just to make sure, see if I missed something. It was in Italian, and so you had to read the whole time, which is fine with me. Actually, one of my favorite movies is actually an Asian film, and you have to obviously read the entire time. And then there's other really, really good movies that you have to read, such as like City of God and stuff like that. So that didn't hurt it for me. It did sound odd sometimes with some of the people speaking, just Italian itself. Some of the phrasing sounded odd to me, but again, that was not the issue with it. It seemed like this was a TV show that you watch that's like episode 5 or 6 of season 2, and you're watching it just completely out of context, because it treats the scenarios and situations like it's a really big or important moment. But you don't really feel that it's there big and important because you don't understand what's going on. You don't know any of the characters. There's zero real story going on. You're told when you're first there that here's a story. You're said, we're searching this place. Iran, I believe is what it's called. We're searching this place, and there's a past behind it, and this master's been wanting to find it this whole time. Well, that's the story they tell you at the beginning, and that's basically it. You just see what happens when they find the crash scene, and that's what I mean by it seems like a TV series. If this was, again, if you had build-up, if you had seen the story of this teacher trying to get there, or this master trying to get to this point, and you had some build-up between the characters, but there would be moments where it would show the characters that don't matter. You have the master. That's really the only one that even matters in the whole story, and maybe his apprentice, it seems like, Thor. But then you have the other ones. One of them's just messing with the lightsaber for whatever reason, and the lightsaber's kind of going out, and then later he kind of shocks himself, and it was just a stupid little humorous moment. None of the Jedi actually seemed like Jedi. It just, a lot of the characters, it didn't feel very Star Warsy. It just seemed off to me. The story as a whole, again, this is where I talk about a lot of fan films do this. They take advantage of the fact that you've seen Star Wars. And Star Wars, brilliantly, A New Hope started off with a big action scene. It gets you into the moment, gets you going. And it didn't, there was nothing there. The difference was a prior fan film that I reviewed, Darth Maul. It started off kind of slow with some dialogue and stuff like that before getting into the action. But it pays off, or it's okay, and it works because you know who Darth Maul is. You know who the Emperor is that's speaking. So you're in. You want to know what's going on with this. So it takes advantage of that kind of advantage that it has. This one is completely different characters. It's a completely different concept or idea, and it drags along us a third of the way through the story before anything even really begins to unfold. It's just them literally seeing this ship and then deciding they're going to go to the ship, figuring out a way into the ship, and not like excitingly trying to traverse things, just literally flying around the ship waiting to find a location that they can bore into and get inside of the ship. And then getting outside, checking to see whether it's going to be poisonous or not for them, and then walking to a location before one guy begins to find out what's going on. A third of it. That's not how you bring people in. I would have never finished it if it wasn't for the request for me to finish it. Then it jumps into some backstory. It shows the characters, and my lord, this is some of the worst acting I've ever seen. I mean, horrendous acting. And there's a lot of really cool CGI in here, but there's also a lot of really bad CGI. And the fight choreography is miserable. I mean, miserable. It's pretty unbelievable how bad it is at points. And again, the Jedi, it's like they've never touched a lightsaber before in their life. They have one guy that can do flips and jump around, but again, like, okay, so you got one guy that has a slight idea of what he's doing. This is an Artaru specialist. That doesn't really sell much. And at each point, it just would kick you out with the terrible acting. The writing was not good. Some of the lines were just terrible. And the backstory was put in there, but it set off the pacing. Just the pacing was, when it would cut from one scene to the other, it was, force feeding you things, and it didn't fit with the way the story was unfolding. And it seemed like you kind of always knew what was happening. There was no real build up. There was no suspense. It was trying to be suspenseful, and that's what I mean by it always seemed like it was expecting you to know something you don't know. It was expecting you to think that something big was being revealed when something was just being revealed. And it almost seemed kind of pretentious in how it was done, as if it was like expecting this to be just simply spectacular when there wasn't really anything that great to it. When you dig into it, the story was told at the beginning, and then it goes through some moments and tries to act like something matters. Like at the very end, Thor ends up getting killed, and he looks at his master and says, "You could have stopped it." You're like, what do you mean he could have stopped it? But it's like it's trying to create. There's no conflict in this story. There's faceless beings that the Jedi are fighting because they show up. But there's nothing that is built into it. They don't know what they're doing. They're just trying to fight because they're trying to fight. The ship itself is supposed to be a wreck, but it's perfectly in place. Like, it doesn't look like it's wrecked at all. The ship then turns around and blows up the ship that the Jedi appeared on, but yet none of the Jedi sense that a bunch of people just died. The apprentice Thor says that he senses life around, but the master says he doesn't. Why is that the case? And then you later find out that the master, and again, this is starting to get into spoilery stuff, but I don't suggest you watching it, so that's why I've kind of spoiled a little bit here and there, because I don't think it's that great. I don't think it's worth spending 40 minutes to go over. But if you want to, then go watch it and then come back to this. But the master is the chosen one. And so how is he not realizing what's alive and what's dead? It doesn't really get put together. It seems like a lot of people liked it because it was put out in 2011 and we didn't have any Star Wars stuff. And it was trying to want to like something. Again, if it was episode 6 of, a TV series and other things have been put or explained into it leading into it, then maybe there's a case to say that this could have been a decent episode, but I still don't think it was a decent episode. I want to take it easy on fan films because it's fan films and they put it up for free on YouTube. But I mean, still, some of the acting was terrible. The choreography of the fighting was just horrific, and the just minor things that should not have been that bad for a fan film, especially one as big as this one's supposed to be, and they're asking for donations at the end to continue the series. It just seemed like it should have been done better. The costuming wasn't very good, but because I'm talking negative about a fan film, and I didn't really want to do that, but this is such a big fan film, and it was requested of me, and I guess I can't be positive on every fan film. And so I wanted to bring up some adjustments for how I think it could have been done to make it a little more interesting. Bring you in at the beginning, lead you along, make you think certain things are happening, then changes, flips and stuff like that, where I think the backstory, so if you're not watching it, the master goes up and finds this kind of hologram that begins to tell him the secrets of what's going on with Iran. And the whole point is he's trying to find an old, kind of sect or group that supposedly found immortality, which is kind of interesting side note. And I may cover this Wednesday, but this is actually something that was used in the comics, or it seems like it got the idea from it in the Dr. Aphra comics, where her father's searching out to find this old group of Jedi that were trying to seek out immortality. And it's not believed that it actually exists, which is one of the things they talk about as they're leading in, that they don't believe that it's a myth that these people exist, that no one was able to really figure out how to solve immortality, and that was played around with Dr. Aphra. But this hologram's telling him the story, and he tells him how they had a battle, and there was another sect that didn't want to, that thought what they were doing was wrong, and they tried to fight against them and kill them, and they ended up protecting their belief. And then again, another thing that just didn't make sense, they talked about trying to, start having kids awaiting for the chosen one, but they're putting in stuff that doesn't really have much to do with the story, and it just seemed kind of odd. But I think what should have happened is you start off in the middle of that battle. In the middle of the battle, that is the, flashback. You start off there and you have the battle and the attack. And so it puts you into it. And then that, flashback talks about that they ended up, after protecting Iran and hiding it from those who the power, they could corrupt it and use it for evil, that they then awaited the chosen one. And the actual movie starts off, how their movie, the fan film starts off, it starts off with Thor. And then he walks in to tell his master that they found Iran. And so I think it would have been better to start off with the attack and the battle happening, and then lead into, and now we just wait the chosen one. And then it goes to Thor as he goes in and says, Master, we found it. It begins to kind of hint towards the possibility that maybe Thor's the chosen one, but it leaves you with some questions. You're wondering, and it's gotten you into it because it started out with an action scene that kind of drew you in and told you the story in action and while things are going on. And then once you get in there, you don't have some of the dumb stuff that they had and little minor fixes, but I'm just talking about story here. Then he goes in and they walk in and they're trying to figure out what's going on. They sense something's going on. They both realize that there's life happening, that there's something happening on the ship, but it's eerie and they can't figure out what it is. And so they begin to split up, and the master goes off, and that's when he finds a hologram. But instead of getting the backstory, he's told, and this is what actually happens in the movie, that the ship is set up to destroy anything that is not the chosen one. And when they're walking, you see a shot in two shots where it goes and kind of reads over the body, and it happens to both Thor and the master. And so have that still be the case, but have it where you think that it still opens up the door that Thor is the chosen one. And so when the master sees this and hears this, he then says, we've got to get out of here. We've got to go because the ship's going to kill everyone. And he realizes like only one person, only the chosen one's going to survive. And he thinks this, of course, is Thor. And so he leaves out, and Thor has been in the middle of this fighting with a group, fighting these, faceless creatures that they fought. And when the master gets by, they have to fight to try to get to Thor, and everyone dies off, and it's left with just the master and Thor. And the master then begins to tell Thor what's happening, and that they've got to go, or the master's got to leave, that Thor is the chosen one, and that he's the only one that can find the secrets. And Thor's like, I'm not going to leave you, master. I'm not going to abandon you. And the master says, no, this has been my lifelong journey to figure out what this is, what everything that's going on. I'm willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to die to go here. You have to stay. You have to figure it out. I'm willing to try to escape, but you have to stay and you have to solve this and figure this out for me. And Thor says, I can't leave you. And he goes, I command you to do this. And as this is coming, more people are coming down to attack. And Thor's like, Master, you have to leave now. If you leave, I will stay. And the master's like, okay, then I'll go. And he begins to start to leave, and he tries to fight off some of the opponents. But as he does, he realizes that they're not trying to fight him, but they're moving past him to go and attack Thor. And he's shocked by this, and the realization becomes to come over him that, wait, maybe am I the chosen one? And as he turns and looks, Thor's shocked as well as he sees them running past his master and not doing anything, and sees his master just standing there not reacting at all. He's then struck down. And this is when the master runs to him and he says to his master, you could have stopped them. Why did you do nothing? And that's when he dies in his arms. And as the ship starts to crumble and collapse, and he runs to the ship to leave, having the hologram on him is when it pops up and says, you are the chosen one. You're the one we've been waiting for. And now it's your turn to go on the journey to solve and understand and figure out immortality. And that's when the movie ends. And I think those reveals happening at these points, that there's a conflict created at different times, that some of the meaningful moments that they tried to make to be meaningful is actually played out in a way that's more understandable. You have an action point that sets up the story leading forward. And I think it could have, with some editing changes, could have made it a much more interesting film and a lot better. I mean, obviously some of the stuff with the terrible acting, and I cannot emphasize it enough, the acting is terrible. It could have, been better. But overall, man, it was not good. It was pretty bad. It might be one of the worst fan films I've seen so far. I'm kind of blown away with how positive the reactions have been behind it. But I'll close off there because I don't want to spend too much time hating on a fan film. But I'm going to be reviewing these fan films, and sometimes they're going to be bad. And a lot of times I don't want to hate on too much. But this had such positive reviews that I didn't feel like I was picking on a small person trying to build these stories up. They got enough donations to be able to make another one. And so I felt that discussing it and then giving my explanations for what I would have done a little bit different to make that story function a little bit better, I decided to go on with it as well. But I look forward to reading your comments down below, whether or not you liked it, whether or not maybe I just completely missed the point of the story, and whether or not my idea would have been any better at all, or they just both were terrible. I don't know, but I look forward to hearing your thoughts about them down below. As always, thank you very much for watching, and never forget, you Nerf herders, I love you.